Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Empty Reviews. That's right, Empty Reviews. If you don't know what Empty Reviews is, Empty Reviews was this sideshow that I started about 3 or 4 months ago, where I would just review certain things like movies or TV shows or albums or things like that. Unfortunately, I stopped that. I don't know what happened. I just kind of stopped doing that. But with this coronavirus thing, I had plenty of time to post more content. So this show is coming back, but now it's only going to be a YouTube exclusive. I'm only going to keep the video version, not the audio version. For this empty review, I'm going to be reviewing the new The Weeknd album, After Hours. This is a highly anticipated album. The Weeknd's last album was about 3 or 4 years ago with Starboy. That was his full-fledged album. He did release that little EP, My Dear Melancholy, which is great, by the way. One of my favorite projects from him. But yeah, it's been a while since he's put out an album. So now that it did came out, and I mean, he started the rollout for this, I think, back in December. And I mean, the hype just could not stop. It was like a train of hype, and the train just kept getting faster and faster and faster with every release. I mean, the day Heartless came out, that was a great song. I remember when it came out, I liked it. I didn't love it though. You know what I mean? But in terms of a song, it was great. I really enjoyed it. Like that kind of that hip hop vibe that Metro Boomin brought to it, I really enjoyed. Then, like 2 days after that, I believe, that's when Blinding Lights came out, which I guess is the poppier of the two tracks, or like a pop cut, you could say, like an 80s, like a strictly 80s type beat. And I mean, I love that. So I still love it. I mean, I don't care how many times I heard that song. Just the chorus is amazing. And I mean, I do like 80s shit, right? I like 80s music, so of course I was going to like that. And I mean, if I'm hinting at towards what my thoughts on this album is, I probably enjoyed the album too because I like 80s music, but I'll get into that in a second. Heartless and Blinding Lights came out, and those were two great songs. And then music videos were coming out, and then you start to see what the aesthetic of the album was going to be with the Weeknd's new look, the references to Casino and, classic like 80s type movies. It became more and more clear what he was going for with this album. And I mean, like I said, and then like a couple of weeks later, he dropped After Hours, which just made the anticipation for this album even bigger because it was almost like a throwback to a trilogy type song. According to a lot of his fans, it was one of those songs that remind him of Trilogy, in terms of how it sounded, just the beat. But it also had a little bit of a Starboy kind of beat involved in it. You know what I mean? Like some techno type beat mixed with the trippy, dark, R&B instrumental. So After Hours came out, and I mean, I loved it. I mean, After Hours, it's definitely in my top 5 songs of the year, and top 5 are the Weeknd. No, not top 5 the Weeknd songs. He has a lot of good ones. Just in general, I mean, that song is just fucking amazing, right? So I heard that song, I'm like, oh shit, we're in for something great with this one. So and then there was like a couple of months wait, but now the album is finally here, and I want to talk about how I felt. So the first listen, I mean, obviously I stayed up to 12 because I mean I was so excited for this album. I mean, the anticipation for this album was fucking nuts. Especially for me and other people that I noticed. Like all my friends that I would talk to was like, yo, I can't wait to listen to The Weeknd, this and that, right? So I listened to the album, and in my first run through of the album, I was kind of like underwhelmed a little bit. But I knew it was just because I was expecting something different than what it was. I knew it wasn't because the album was bad. Like for sure, I could tell the album wasn't bad. The way the album sounded throughout its runtime was not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, to be honest. I think I was just, The Weeknd just did such an amazing job at building hype for this album that I think that was the problem. I think the hype was so big for it. I didn't even know what I was expecting. I was just expecting something to blow my fucking mind, right? And it wasn't. I feel like this album is pretty understated. It's not like fucking crazy. Like it doesn't just blow up in your face. You know what I mean? It is more understated. So that was my first listen. I'm like, okay, this is something I gotta re-listen to, right? Like that's not one of those albums that you listen to it once and you get its brilliance, in my opinion. That's like you gotta re-listen to it over and over again. And I think I've listened to the album like 3 or 4 times by now. And yeah, I could say it's an amazing album. I think it might be The Weeknd's, besides Trilogy, it might be his most cohesive project. Fuck, I don't know. I mean, I think it's definitely one of his most cohesive projects as of late, right? Because if you think about Starboy and Beauty Behind the Madness, if you think about those two albums, there was some fucking amazing highs, like high highs, right? Those albums had like a couple of songs that were just like, these are amazing songs. But it also had a couple of songs in there that were just like, okay, it's okay at best. You know what I mean? Especially Starboy. I mean, Starboy was like 17, 18 songs. There was some amazing songs in there, you know, like Sidewalk, A Reminder. The first song, Starboy, and the last song, I Feel It Coming, obviously were amazing songs. There was a lot of highs. And the same with Beauty Behind the Madness. I mean, Tell Your Friends. That song was amazing. Often, the 50 Shades of Grey song. I mean, like, so you get what I'm saying. Like, he had a lot of highs on his albums, but they almost didn't feel, at least the last two albums, they didn't feel as cohesive, like, in terms of quality as, for example, this one does. Because you listen to this and just the way this album is even structured, a lot of people think it sounds samey, and I can understand that, but the way this album flows and the way each song sounds, as samey as it might sound, just because it has that 80s theme, I don't think the songs are really like that identical that you can't tell them apart. I don't even have to look at the track list, and I didn't make an effort to memorize these songs. I can just remember how each song goes into the next one and what the structure is, because there is a structure. Like, it might be by producer, just content, but there's definitely a structure in this album that I feel like makes it one of the best albums of the year for sure, and will probably stay one of the best albums of the year. And now I'll get into track by track at this point. I mean, Alone Again, the fucking beat switch is amazing. I didn't really like the trappy sound that it gets into in the second half, but halfway through the song where it gets into the breakdown, it sounds fucking angelic. It sounds insane. When I first heard it, I'm like, okay, we're good. I just felt like, okay, this is gonna sound great. Then Too Late is one of those songs. Obviously, it has a My Dear Melancholy sound. It does. Not Call Out My Name per se, but like those Jessa Felstein songs. I think I said it right. That's crazy that I got that in one try. But that guy, that producer, like that kind of style, which I like, right? Then again, I think that people were expecting trilogy with this album. And, you know, after listening to After Hours, I could understand why. But it wasn't, this was not supposed to be trilogy. And I think that's why a lot of people got their expectations messed up. Like, I think if there was one song that told you the vibe of this album, was Blinding Lights. I think that's foremost what he was going for with this album. Heartless, you know, he wanted to give that side of himself, the more hip-hop oriented side. And then, you know, After Hours, a more trilogy side. But what this album is really supposed to be is Blinding Lights, right? So you listen to Too Late with that mindset and it makes sense. Then you listen to Hardest to Love. That was the most challenging song in the album for me. When I first heard the super fucking fast tempo on that, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, when I heard that, I'm like, what the fuck is this? Not in a bad way, just completely out of left field. And I mean, now more listens is starting to grow on me. Like, every song is starting to grow on me. I think every song is great. Like, at first, some of these songs, like Hardest to Love, Too Late, the interlude, were kind of like, I don't know how I feel about it. But it does get better, and you do understand what he's going for. Then from that, he goes to Scared to Live. And this is the thing. I feel like this album is almost like a combination of all the sounds that he likes coming together. Because the trilogy was just kind of one sound. It was its own sound. It wasn't like, it was experimental in a way, but it wasn't like it jumped into like, you know, techno or like pop. It was strictly what it was, right? Then you move on to Kissland, which is getting, you know, more cinematic, which is what he likes. He likes cinematic sounds, but still very much that trilogy sound. Then you move on to Beauty Behind the Madness. That's when he becomes full-on pop star with a lot of pop songs like Can't Feel My Face and In the Night. And then you can tell that he did want to be a pop star. And, you know, a lot of fans might not have liked that, but he did want to become a pop star and make some pop music. So that's what that was. And Starboy, it was him experimenting with techno music. You know what I mean? Still very much pop. You know, he was still in that pop lane, but he was experimenting with techno music. Then My Dear Melancholy, it wasn't even trilogy. I don't think My Dear Melancholy was trilogy sounds. It was just more somber music than we'd ever heard from him in a while. So that's why fans are like, oh, dark subject matter and tone and you know, sound. Obviously it's trilogy, when it's not really the case. But regardless, there he also experimented. I think he refined some techno music more. Now with After Hours, I just feel like it's definitely the perfect like mix of everything. Like I feel like this is the sound that The Weeknd wants, and I think that's why. And the more you listen to it, you get that, and that's why I really fucking love this album. It's definitely my favorite album of the year so far. But I mean, like I said, Scared to Live, I was going to say, it reminded me of the last song from Beauty Beyond the Madness, Angel. That was a song that it was called. Scared to Live reminded me of Angel. So I was like, it was definitely a familiar sound. And I still enjoyed it. Not my favorite song of the album, probably one of my least favorites, but I still really enjoyed it. Then you move on to Snow Child. Here's the thing, right? So you get Too Late, Hardest to Love, Scared to Live. That's like its own chunk, right? So that's why I feel like this album is so well structured, because it's like separated into chunks of songs that happen to be also like produced by around the same producers. But still, I mean, Too Late, Hardest to Love, and Scared to Live, that's a good chunk right there, right? Then you move on to Snow Child, Escape from LA, and Heartless, right? These three songs were, I think, produced by Metro Boomin. I'm not sure, but I think I would say this is the more Metro Booming sound, as in the more hip hop and R&B type sound. Because you get to Snow Child, Weeknd is just rapping. It kind of sounds like a more low key Reminder, less poppy Reminder, which I really liked. That was just, I mean, even just how he starts the song with "I promised myself by 17, if I didn't make it, I'll make my wrist bleed." That was just like, okay. Like, I've seen a lot of reaction videos for this album, and everybody is like, "Oh, what the fuck?" Like, that's the line that catches a lot of people off guard. And it just shows how vulnerable he is, and he's just rapping through it. And I really enjoyed Snow Child. Then you move on to Escape from LA, which is my favorite song on the album, just because, I mean, it's the most R&B song on the album, and I really like R&B. And I mean, Metro Boomin, Metro Boomin needs to make more R&B music, because this fucking beat on this song is amazing. So I just love the way this sounded, Escape from LA. Then you go to Heartless, which, we've all heard, the more, hip hop sounding. So that's another chunk right there. Snow Child, Escape from LA, and then Heartless. Then you move on to Faith, Blinding Lights, In Your Eyes, and Save Your Tears. And I think these 4 songs, like, this is probably the most poppy. Like, the first chunk is like techno almost, or like 80s techno. Now we're getting with Faith, Blinding Lights, In Your Eyes, and Save Your Tears. That's like a 80s pop sound, right? That's that sound. And again, I mean, this is just so well structured. I can't say this anymore, but it is, right? So Faith, I really enjoyed. A lot of people consider it one of the best. It is one of the best songs on the album. It's not like one of my favorites, but I really enjoyed it. Here's what's even crazier. Faith, Blinding Lights, In Your Eyes, and Save Your Tears, right? As much as, like I said, 80s pop, it also has a storyline that's running through it too, which is great. And I mean, the same for the last 2 chunks. Man, the more I think about this album, the more I like it, because like I'm saying, it's fucking perfectly structured. If you don't enjoy the sounds of this album, or may not like individual songs, that's fine. But as a fucking body of work, you cannot tell me this isn't an amazing album. But regardless, so we move on from Faith to Blinding Lights, which, we've all heard, probably the most poppy song in this album for sure. I mean, the next 2 are super poppy. In Your Eyes, that song reminded me of I Feel It Coming by Daft Punk. I think that's the feeling it gives you, especially with the saxophone solo at the end. It gives you this happy fucking feeling. This could have been the last song of an album like Starboy, you know what I mean? Like, it gives me that feeling, very upbeat. The saxophone at the end is amazing, right? It's just very upbeat and happy. It makes you feel good. So then we move on to Save Your Tears, which is kind of like an indie synth poppy song, which is, I mean, it's produced by Tame Impala, so it's that kind of sound. And if I'm gonna be honest, as much as I really enjoyed it, that's another one of my favorite songs of the album, one of the most played ones that I've had so far. As much as I like it, I think that's the one song that doesn't really belong with the album, because that sound is not 80s. And I think all of these songs, there is some sort of 80s tinge to it. This was not 80s. So, as much as I like it, I feel like this is the one song that could have been taken out to make it even more cohesive. You know what I mean? And then the last chunk with Repeat After Me interlude, After Hours, and Until I Bleed Out, that's more of the trilogy sound. That's where we're getting with that, right? I mean, Repeat After Me, I'm starting to like it more and more, especially because I can relate with the lyrics. You don't love him if you're thinking of me. I don't even think that was a melody, but whatever. Hopefully I don't get a copyright strike because I sung it so well. I'm joking. But After Hours, I mean, I already said one of my favorite songs of the year. I mean, it's an immaculately made song. It's incredible. It's really incredible. I can't sing its praises enough. And then you end with Until I Bleed Out, probably one of the most fucking wild and out there songs with the experimentation of sounds and shit. And then that's the album. This album has an immaculate structure, and I think people need to talk about this more. When you're looking how to structure a fucking album and it not be boring, because this album is far from boring. You know what I mean? Like I said, you might not like certain songs, but this album is not fucking boring. It's not. I don't care what anybody says. You know, the sounds are kind of similar if you want to look at it that way, but they're different enough. And he switches it enough that it's not fucking boring. I think it might be his most well-made album. It might not be his most unique. It might not be his most original, but I think it's the best made album he's put out so far. With the hype that this album had, you're expecting this album to be some crazy, sonically original and insane production, but it's more of like sounds you've heard before, but put together by this guy in the best way it could have possibly been. You know what I mean? And I just love this album. I guess, you know, if I had to give it a rating, this is like a 9.5. I would even give it a 10, but I don't want to give it a 10. You know, it's so recent yet. I don't want to give it a masterpiece title. But it's definitely, if you want to look at craftsmanship, I think it's his best made album yet. Might not be your favorite. It might not have your favorite songs in it. That's another thing. The care that was put into this, it's noticeable how much he cared about this album. Compared to, I mean, I'm not saying he didn't care about albums in the past, but I think he treated it like one song at a time. Versus when he thought of this album, he was thinking, I mean, even the aesthetic says it all. Like all the music videos that he's put out, the short film that he put out, his look, you know, what he was going for, the vibe. Like he created a whole new world with his album. And that's, I think, why it sounds so good to me. Thank you guys so much for watching this review, this empty review of The Weeknd's new album, After Hours. If you would like to see more content from this channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel right here. I think I'm pointing the right way, hopefully. Then if you want to see the last official Empty Opinions episode, you can click right here. And until next time, thank you so much for watching.